Hello, this is Blake Temez with the Blake Temez podcast, and today I want to turn my attention to those of you who are listening who act as lay leaders or lay ministers in the Catholic Church in any way, in any setting. Now, those of us who are lay people, right, so not ordained, not consecrated religious, but who also have really key roles, either as employees or volunteers within Catholic parishes or schools or other institutions, have an interesting kind of in-between place in the life of the church. Because the theology of the laity has developed in such a way, I think a really beautiful way, to understand that lay people have their proper vocation, quote unquote, in the world, right? In secular settings, bringing the light of Christ and transforming secular institutions, and whether that's business or education or law or whatever it might be, transforming them to conform more closely to the light of Christ, right? To the gospel and everything that goes along with that. And that's a beautiful thing, the lay vocation being expressed most properly in secular settings. And of course, if we're going to present this as a dichotomy, then religious, on the other end of the spectrum, so to speak, have their particular vocation within the life of the church, considered in terms of let's call it the practices of religion, right? There's one of the reasons why the identification or the term religious developed, because they devoted themselves to a life of religion, particularly those practices like meditation, liturgy, participation in the sacraments, and those other disciplines that conform them closer to the image of Christ and bring them closer in relationship with God. Now, the dichotomy between those two, the lay state and the religious state, has been developed to understand that there are proper distinctions between the two, obviously between the nun and the mother, the married woman, for example. But there's also been created a unity between the different states of life by recognizing that all are called to holiness according to their station, right? So there's this unity in purpose of being directed towards God and growing more and more into His image and sharing in His life, while remaining this distinction in the duties and the role that a person has particular to their state. Now, that's kind of the classic distinction with this development of the universal call to holiness added onto it. Now, something interesting is happening in the church that has existed in different ways, but it's becoming a little bit more obvious now, is this call that many experience to a lay ecclesial ministry, right? So someone being a lay person and having their proper vocation in the world, but having a special role, a call to participate in the life of the church, in the ministry of the church, in a focused way, in a committed way. And so I feel like that describes my circumstance, my lived reality of being a husband and a father, and having interests that are particular to my secular state as a layperson, but then also being highly committed to the mission of the church and being involved in direct ministry to young people and other groups within the context of a parish, right? So there's kind of this two-world dynamic happening. And if you're in a similar situation, you might kind of recognize that tension, right? The tension that exists between caring for one's family, pursuing interests and career and these other areas of life that are appropriate for a layperson, but then also wanting to be deeply committed to the life of the church and contribute in powerful and meaningful ways to it. And so if that's you, I just want to call out the fact that you are noticed, and there are many of us out there who share this kind of in-between state as the church continues to develop a vision for this identity of a lay ecclesial minister or a lay leader. Now, with that in mind, I do want to encourage you to do some thinking about those areas in your life that could use deeper integration and kind of interconnections between them. I noticed in the last episode that there's great value in pursuing an integrated life, right? A life that has enough resilience to be adaptable when things change and has a certain harmony to it, but that is not static, right? And what I want to offer you in coming conversations is some ways of tracking and being aware of all the different dimensions of your life that, if integrated, can be mutually beneficial, right? So deepening your knowledge in an area that might be secular, right? Like science or film or music or whatever it might be, and cultivating that with enthusiasm, but collecting that knowledge and keeping track of it in such a way that you can connect it to the ministerial setting, that setting in the church, when the time comes. And vice versa, having ways to recognize what you're learning in the context of ministry, in your relationships with people that you encounter at church or at school or wherever it might be, and how those lessons, that insight that you get in that setting, speaking back into the secular aspects of your life with your family, in your work, if your ministry work is part-time or volunteer, and creating that conversation so that all these different parts of your life begin to cohere into a whole and interconnect in beautiful ways that can generate creative insights for how to improve your ministry or to improve your relationships in other parts of your life. So if you're looking for integrated living as someone who kind of straddles that boundary between the secular and the ecclesial, this podcast is for you. I mentioned in a previous episode that I want to call out particular difficulties that can come for young men who are trying to pursue certain goals with ambition, but are not sure how that corresponds with their desire to be an authentic disciple, to be an effective minister, especially when it comes to the prospect of supporting a family while remaining deeply committed to the life of the church, which, frankly speaking, does not often come with great pay, right? Your commitment to discipling others, to being a catechist, whatever it might be, often doesn't come with all of the resources that would be needed to support a family. And so wanting to dive deeper into that and see how it is possible to remain faithful in all areas of life and yes, navigate sacrifices that have to be made, but recognize how God can be calling you to abundance in all areas of life. So again, lay ministers, lay leaders, this one is for you, especially those of you who are thinking about how to pursue this with earnest while supporting a family. And so I look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you for your time and attention as always, and peace.